risen. This video is regarding the VA's attempts to give veterans benefits back to people that were separated, other than RER, it's been a while, RER 1 or RER 3. I can't remember my separation codes. But anyway, honorable, anything other than honorable. You have other people that were given dishonorable, then you have ADSEPs, administrative separations, and then you have your general SEPs, your general separations. And this is dealing with these people that have anything except honorable, and giving them their veterans benefits back. Because generally, if you have anything other than an honorable separation, some cases administrative separation, you don't get benefits. Now, this is good and bad. Some people actually know somebody who they were separated, they got pregnant, they couldn't complete a dependent care certificate because they didn't have anybody. This is different. They shouldn't be penalized. They could be an orphan, or all their family, passed away as they aged. People shouldn't be penalized in a situation like that. Or administrative separation because, maybe their rate was done away with, their Navy, and their MOS was just done away with. So they're given a chance, either change your rate. This actually happened while I was in. Either change your rate, or you're going to get administratively separated. So, these people shouldn't be penalized for actions of the Navy as well. But now when people are people that were gay, now people that, decided to use marijuana, yeah, there's a big backlash against it, always has been. But it's a choice, I grew up in a community with a lot of people who grew in their backyards. And, my mother had a lot of hippie friends, and hippie types, even a country hippie. And still, it's a choice. And if you're going to sell Molly on base, I knew somebody who did that. It's a choice. And Molly is still illegal. So, it's a choice. And, ayahuasca, or when somebody's going to Latin America, or peyote when somebody's going to the American Southwest or Mexico, still, these are choices. Unless somebody is part of the Native American church, they probably shouldn't do it on active duty, or I've known people that are like, hey, I'm going to a rave. Oh, you're probably going to get UA'd. Yeah, I'm doing it while I'm on leave. I've known people who did that. And so these are choices that people make. And, I see it as complicated when, some of these people get their benefits back. But what I've seen, particularly the VA here near me, is they bend over backwards for these people, while legitimate veterans completed a contract. They maybe completed a volunteer mobilization or a forced one, and they're being given lower priority than the other people, because we're involved in another movement. Oh yeah, let's give these people back what was taken from them. Yeah, some people legitimately it was taken. Hey, you get pregnant and you don't have a family. It's complicated. I would certainly, I'm surprised that people would, that the command wouldn't try to find a way to keep them, or the people that were, their rate was done away with, they would be forced into a new contract, um, I would, really um, be surprised that the command wouldn't work with these people either. There's tons of billets that are not filled that are that are helpful to the Navy to fill them, or the Navy or the Army or whatever, to fill them with these people, who they've got 2.5 years left on their contract, and their rate was just, the end time for a message that was doing away with the rate just passed. So yeah, you have a week. There's plenty of stuff that they could be pushed into that are billets that are not specifically earmarked for a particular MOS. I saw this when I was in, and especially being as this was the area MOS and occupations and advancement and ratings and schools and all of that type stuff. That was my initial area before I was pulled into force protection. And actually, I walked into it. I loved force protection, made a career out of it, and an education out of it. But I just find it problematic that the people who didn't have any issues, again, this is discounting the people who they didn't have able to complete a dependent care certificate, which is automatic separation item. Or people, unless they get a nanny, but that was a different time. You know, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. It was a different time. People didn't think like people now. I knew people in the military the past 10 or 15 years, as well as when I was a contractor, that they just got a nanny, and that makes them compliant with the requirement for a dependent care certificate. Dependent care certificate, for those who don't know, is a document that tells the DoD whether you were a contractor or active duty, but we're specifically addressing active duty and reserve troops. If you're deployed, it's where your children will go, or we'll say your dependents. It specifically states a plan of action and alternate plan of action for your dependents if you are deployed, or if you are injured or missing in action, or you die in uniform. And it's required. Like I said, it's a separable item if you can't do it. But I'm not speaking of those people or their MOS is merged or eliminated. I'm speaking of all the other people. Now, during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell time, I knew people who were gay. I was deployed with people who were gay. I was in active duty, base side with people who were gay. And everybody's the same, But yet, some people get sick of it. They get sick of, military life. And so they'll use it to get out. I also knew people like that. And I had one person ask me, hey, why don't I just try that? I'm like, that's lying. They're like, hey, it'll work though. I'm like, yeah, but you're basically taking your career and anything that happens after the military and putting it in a can and shaking it up and then, putting it out on a table to see what happens or what's still together and what's not. What did I just destroy? Because these codes for discharges, they follow you. They follow you. And so not that a lot of gay people do that. Some people, their command found out and they were separated, which is not right. But it's just difficult with these others and generals and adcepts, or dishonorable, and it's been downgraded. Actually, that would be a upgrade. It's just problematic that when the VA would bend over backwards for these people, when veterans who not had any issue are being derailed. I just think it's problematic. It's the climate, you know. You know, when you stand too much for the underdog and you forget the people that fit in the norm, that's just as bad as when the underdog was ignored. So yeah, it's just concerning because I've seen it a lot lately, and it's just concerning, very concerning. You know, some people should be treated just as the same as people who have an honorable, whether it's an RER1 or RER3. The difference being the character of return. What is it? R2? R2 means honorable. I think it's R2. Honorable, but not recommended to re-enlist, if I remember my codes. It doesn't mean they got in trouble. It just means they're not preferred. There's different characters of service. Actually, I mean, of return to service. But, you know, so it's complicated. But again, you know, when, you know, this new movement to what's the word? To refranchise veterans who've been separated under alternate codes and give them their benefits back, and they're prioritized above veterans without anything at all. I just think it's really problematic, especially in the current, you know, things going on currently regarding the VA and DOD and such. You know, but I'm not saying I think that these people should be ignored. I'm just saying that things are complicated, and we have to remember our priorities, you know. And yeah, when people are targeted, you know, because they're gay or GLBTQ plus, I think that's problematic. Because, and hey, I don't. As long as somebody is with me and they have my back in a firefight, or they're going to shout an alarm if they see, you know, signs of an IED or something, and somebody pays attention to detail, you know, and how they're taking care of another vet, it doesn't matter what people's background is, you know. But yet, it's those people who abuse the system that can make it a problem. And, you know, you don't go into the military to get medical care. I know I'm going to get backlash for this, but you don't go in the military to get medical care. You know, transition surgery after somebody gets out, you know, if the VA is able to handle that, I mean, why not? You know, there's a lot of other stuff they do. Sometimes, you know, what do you call them? Elective surgeries. Some stuff the VA does if somebody's disabled. You know, they may have a copay or whatever, but, you know, some elective things the VA will help people with. I don't know about the expense or whatever of transitioning, but I mean, at least the hormones. You know, I mean, that's the lower cost of the entire process. But people don't go in the military to get medical care, you know. Yeah, I don't think the government burden should be to shoulder transitioning in every single agency, even Department of Corrections. You have people going in jail who, you know, start to, you know, I would question their transition legitimacy anyway. You know, if something is beat into them through prison culture, and, you know, they're repeatedly trafficked, and they're repeatedly pushed into a certain gender role just because of the corruption and the abuse of prison, you know, I would think that, you know, it's a questionable transition, you know, or if somebody is some kind of a predator and it's a way to, kind of get out of things or change an identity or something. I'm not saying that anybody who's transitioning is a predator. I'm just making a statement at what I've seen people trying to use certain protections that don't deserve them. Um, I just think that these are things. If somebody wants to transition, and they're psychologically qualified, physically qualified, then it should probably be done after they get out. If and legally qualified, if they're legally qualified as well. We can't have people using different kinds of protection or the extreme identity makeover to disappear. I've seen it. And that way they can go back to offending. I would think the transgender community would want to protect their own too, their legitimate own, not people that are trying to, again, go through the extreme identity makeover just so they can escape. But anyway, dealing with the discharge modifications and people's veterans benefits, I just think it's really concerning with seeing veterans being disenfranchised, not getting what they deserve, and other people receiving a higher priority than them. Now again, I'm excluding, certain characterizations. I think the military would be out of their mind to discharge people just because they're pregnant. I think they would be out of their mind. I would, if I was the commander, or the detailer. The detailer is the person that assigns billets. They assign your your job within a particular command. Those are called billets. And mostly officers go into billets, but enlisted is kind of approached differently, but it's the same idea. And they'd be out of their mind. There's so much they can still do. And so you have them on shore duty, or they're a non-deployed asset. There's still a lot of stuff they can do. And once they have their child, there's daycare. There's a lot of things that can be done to keep them, at least to finish their contract, which changes numbers dramatically. People are finishing contracts. It has a dramatic effect on the end numbers, force numbers. And or if somebody's going to, have their MOS go away because that particular MOS is being terminated because of redundancy, maybe another MOS also does part of that job. So they'll merge them or just end, like I said, end the MOS period. They'd be out of their mind to not give those people an opportunity to finish out their contract. There's plenty of billets out there. But speaking with all the other stuff about choices that people made that got them kicked out, especially the criminal ones, yeah, I just think it's wrong that veterans that did their best when they were in, and, they may like to party too, or, they may be gay, just like the guy that went in and said, I'm gay, I want out. They did the right thing, they kept their personal life in their house. And they weren't kicked out. Legitimate people like that who they did their best to fit in and they didn't get in trouble, by doing the criminal stuff. I just think they should be given a higher priority. Other than the couple of situations I mentioned, because it's wrong to give a lower priority to people that did their best. They got their good conduct awards for whatever branch they were in, and but when they get out, they get lower prioritized care. It's pretty concerning to me. But certainly nobody should be, had their benefits taken away because of who they are. Um, Race, religion, uh, sexuality. These are constitutionally guaranteed things. That's for sure. Or for any of the other stuff, or for being, pregnant. Any of the other stuff, or I forgot, excluding the MOSs that are ending or the ratings that are being terminated. All the other people, it's a choice. So those other people who made those choices, they shouldn't have a higher priority to care than the rest of us. Again, I know that, discharges can be complicated and they can be layered with the complications. So, I'll just say that kind of as a caveat, because people who were not separated for one reason or another, they shouldn't have a lower priority. It's wrong. Their care is just as important as anybody else. And just because somebody is they're different than us in one way or another, there's many, many other ways besides the one or two ways that we're the same. But I will say this, that, people shouldn't be joining the military for medical care. That's the way I'll say. Because there's a ton of us vets that would like to serve, but we're denied because of our medical issues. So I don't think it's right when people go in just to get medical care. And I think that also, speaking of transgender issues here, and also I think that people should really have a long time to think and really pray about it and really, weigh the pros and cons of being transitioned in the prison system, because some people may be going in this direction because of the abuse of the prison system. And you can't go back from something like this. Once it's done, it's forever. So, if they had proper supports in place for people transitioning, they would tell them this. They're like, you've been in prison for this many years, and, we see here in your record how many times you've been assaulted. We see how many, times you've been attacked by bad bunk mates, cellmates. Are you sure you want to do this? We have reports of what, has been done to you in your prison. I think that they should be telling people, is this something you really want to do? And then involving, repeat offenders in various crimes. I mean, I would definitely exclude it. Because from what I've seen, I see people taking advantage of the protection of alienated and targeted groups just so they can hide and reoffend. And that was definitely not the behavior of somebody who's repentant and who has made some kind of effort at making peace with their victims, and somebody that definitely wants to change. That situation sounds to me like somebody just is trying to find a new lambskin to wear, or that's probably a bad analogy. Somebody that's trying to find a new vulnerable face to hide their predatory behaviors. That was a bad analogy. Foot and mouth disease. But I just think that veterans, that there shouldn't be this discrepancy in prioritization, and it shouldn't, definitely shouldn't, the prioritization shouldn't favor those, caveat, again, I'm going to mention that caveat of a few different situations, should be treated better than those who have irregular discharges. Anything except honorable. Honorable should always be given the best priority. Again, caveat, but it's a concern for me at what I see going on, particularly in this part of Michigan. It's very concerning for me. It's still, some people have served even though they got in trouble. So, at least medical care. If you've served longer than 90 days, you should have medical care even if you got in trouble. But as far as disability ratings and such, from people who've gotten in serious trouble, I don't know, that's for the VA advocates, law advocates to decide, and the appellate judges. But I think it should be approached very carefully. Very carefully. That we were not giving a retirement to people who don't deserve it by giving them a rating. And criminal conduct while you're in service automatically terminates any benefits that you should have been given. But people still served. They may have been exposed to something. I don't believe we should take away medical care. But when it comes to VBA, Veterans Benefits Administration, from those people who, some kind of criminal behavior, again, we should approach that very carefully. Very carefully. We do not want to give a retirement, just find a different avenue at a retirement to people who got kicked out. Approach it very carefully. But people did serve, even if they got in trouble. So they should be given those medical benefits, even if they got in trouble. But definitely, as far as prioritization, anybody that's an honorable should not be at the bottom of the basket.